Should I go?
And well, let me do a little intro first
Okay.
and some announcements. So first of all, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. This is the fifth of 9 cartography sessions that we have scheduled for 2023 for Greater Cincinnati Grotto. This series is hosted by GCG and is open to anyone interested in participating. We've had people from Europe, we've had people from Central America, South America, all over North America. In the calls that we've had so far, which have been Howard Kalnitz in February, Gary Bush was in March. In April was Bo Gurgle, Dan Garreau, and Pat Cambesis. In May was Bert Ashbrook and Christian DeSalle. Then we took off June and July for caving events, and tonight we're back to it with Ed, who's going to present on cartography of presenting many levels of cave passages in the way that we do draw caves in 2D. So Ed will talk for as long as he would like, and then please ask lots and lots of questions, because Ed's a great resource for information on cartography. After that, we'll open the floor to discuss best practices in teaching cave mapping to others. So that could include sketching, data reduction, data management, cartography, trip report management, which is a really important part of cartography, and any other topic that you're interested in associated with cave mapping. And we'll talk on that subject as long as folks are interested, and then we'll adjourn for the evening, and we'll meet up again next month for the next presentation in this series. And so that's our plan for tonight. Before we get going, a couple of announcements. So first, starting next month, Bo Gurgle will be the host and facilitator for this cartography call. Bo is the new cartography committee chair for Greater Cincinnati Grotto. He's a cave mapper, he's a cave cartographer, and he's the inventor of a new cave map symbol that he proposed in April. So watch the recording from the April call. It's a great symbol for drawing passages that open into true dome pits or into the wall of a cave with ceiling going up and floor going down. A number of people have tried to draw some. I think, in my personal opinion, Bo's is really elegant. And so next month, Bo will take over facilitation of this call, and we'll continue to bring captivating speakers and lots more information to the world of cave cartography. Second announcement, Greater Cincinnati Grotto, starting in October, will be hosting a cave mapping, the full thing, cave mapping training program based out of Great Saltpeter Cave Preserve in Rockcastle County, Kentucky. And this is going to start October 14th with a cave sketching class led by Stephanie Suen. From there, in fact, that day, we'll go into Climax Cave for in-cave sketching practice. And then we're going to continue that monthly, and we'll accept anybody who wants to go in the cave. So this is a beginner's cave. It's a cave that's needed a new map. I think the map is 65 years old. Bo, Howard, is that correct? Something like that. It's a pretty old map. And there's a lot more passage in that cave that's not on the map. So there's a good reason to map it. And when we do those trips, any level from beginners to experts, when something is explained, how to draw a symbol, how to sketch to scale, how to do cross sections, we're going to record that with a phone and then put that on the GCG YouTube page for anybody else to go and take a look at. So again, that's October 14th. Be looking on Facebook for information about that. All right, so with those announcements, let's go ahead and get into it. Tonight's speaker is Ed Klausner, very experienced caver, cave surveyor, cave cartographer. He's completed many map sheets in the Mammoth system, including Albert's Domes, Cleveland Avenue, and Ed, I apologize in advance, this won't be a complete list, I think. Albert's Domes, Cleveland Avenue, South Downey Avenue, Northwest End, Grand Junction, and I'm missing, I think, 2 of them, and Historic. And these are beautiful maps, but tonight he's going to focus on how to draw maps that have many levels. And in fact, I think I missed the one that you're really going to show us that has the many levels on it. So anyway, with that, Ed, the floor is yours. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thank you, Aaron. And I wanted to talk about displaying multi-level caves on two-dimensional maps to elicit comments and suggestions about how to do this better. It can be difficult, and let's start with a really simple one where you really don't have to, it's pretty obvious what's going on in the lower level and a cross-section captures it. That's pretty much all you need. As things get a little bit more complicated, here's a multi-level passage in Mammoth Cave where the best way for me to display this was to...
Ed, can you share your screen?
Uh-oh. I thought I had. Is that going?
So far, I'm still seeing you.
Me, okay. It should be under share. That's what I just did a little while ago. Is that working?
Still seeing you. When you logged in before and we couldn't hear you, we saw the slide.
Right.
Now we're seeing the Teams app. There it is.
Okay. So this was the first one I was talking about where it's pretty simple and you don't have to do anything to show the underlying passage. Everyone can see this one now?
Yes, I can. Can others see it?
Yes.
So this is a part of Mammoth Cave, and the biggest constraint here was that I'm limited to a certain area. I can't extend the map northward. I can't do offsets or really show what's going on, since I'm so limited in the area that the easiest way for me to explain what was going on here is to have these named passages show in a cross-section. So Ranshaw Avenue is on the top, Mayfield Avenue is the lowest level, and in the expanded view of the plan view, you can see how these passages just weave on top of one another. And this is basically the best I can do on this case. Here, I had a little bit more real estate, so I used the traditional dashed lines to show where this underlying passage was in comparison to the upper level. You can't always do that. This is a cave that had multiple lower levels and is a lot of detail here. And if you look at the dashed lines, it's really confusing. So in this case, a cross-section or a profile view kind of shows what's going on a little bit better. So this is again part of Mammoth Cave, and this is a specific map that is used by the park to show the underlying tour route. It doesn't show all the lower passages. It really only shows the tour route. You can see the tour route going through Booth's Arena. And then what I did is I had a second view of this where I wiped out the upper level to show the lower level tour trail. And it has dashed lines showing where the upper level is and only shows the tour trail below. Sometimes I played around with both shading and a little bit of color to show upper and lower levels, and I try to really label them. So on the left-hand side, you see an upper level, and you see how to get to the middle level. And on the right, I have a lower level with how you get there. Not always very easy to do when you really start having more levels than that. So I have overlapping upper levels here, and it's really not very pleasing. I'm open to suggestions on any of this stuff. Here's one, again, where there's just a main level and a lower level, and then upper levels, and then an upper level of the upper level shown with offsets. Here's an interesting cave. It's a post office cave in, it's a series of lava tubes in Northern California. And the profile view really shows what's going on in the cave and the different levels. And these levels are really on top of each other. So the way I approach this on a plan view was on the far left is the uppermost level with an outline of all the levels below it. And then I have progressively lower levels with an indication of where the connection is, using the horizontal line to show how you get from one level to another. And way on the right is the very lowest level.
I like how you did the lines where the connections were.
Yeah, it helps when you're navigating within the cave. Okay, and then we come to Roppel Cave, which just blows everything out of the water. This is one of the sections, I don't even remember which one it is, and it's pretty complicated. And you're looking at multiple levels, and working with Jim Borden on this, he suggested that what I do was break the cave up into, I think he said 7 levels. The problem with that is I came up with 12 levels, and it's still pretty complex. This is not showing all of the cave. You can see kind of on the left, there's some dashed lines. The way I solved this problem, or I think I solved this problem, was when I show any level, I show all the other levels as lightly dashed lines, so you know that something is above and below it. And if you look at some of the numbers around boxes, for example, near the bottom, it says D5, which means that you go down 5 feet to the next level, or D28, you drop down 28 feet to a level below it. And I have more of these, but what I wound up doing was having essentially 12 separate maps. Each one of those levels, some of them are named because there's a passage associated with that level. Others, like level 4, 5, and 6, are just between your Eudora Way and Petrified Wood Passage. Each one of those levels is complete with selected stations, text, and all the other ways that you can either show or hide various features of that level. And one thing, for example, here I show all the other levels, and there's some cross sections, and you can see on the cross section on the left, when I show an upper level, that cross section is going to have to be obliterated. Basically, what I do is I have a mask that is just opaque, and it covers it up, and then I can draw on top of that mask if there's walls and ceiling features and floor features. And here's how I'm showing what happens when you go up and what happens when you go down. Here's the same thing It's the same passage. Well, it's not the same passage. It's a passage above it. So here I'm going up 7 and up 4, and here it changes to down 7 and down 4 by using masks and the up and down, indicating which way the next passage, the next level is.
The D's and 7s those aren't the level, those are the feet, right?
That's
It's not
correct.
going down to level. Okay.
Yep, that's the feet. One of the problems is that it's not always easy to know how many feet up and down something goes because it's a gradual change. It's just a gradual slope that goes from one level to another. So here I have a U kind of close to the middle where I really don't have a distance. It's just a slope passage. And that's not very satisfying. And that's it. So suggestions on what to do?
Your slide, if you go back to the slide on at historic, where you've got, I think it was Fat Man's Misery was underneath. I've got some questions starting there.
Okay, let me get back to it. Can you see the screen?
Not yet, but I think it took a couple seconds last time. Yeah, here it comes. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about the use of the cave map, right? So
Yep.
it could be for showing the tourist trail like you've done here.
Yes.
It could be for marking historical signatures, artifacts, biological. And one of the important parts of that is the navigation. And so you showed that up and down in your other map. What if you were to say hand this over to one of the biology interns, they're going to go look at some planaria or something off of that side passage off of Fat Man's Misery. What are some ways that they can use a cave map that has multiple levels for navigation?
One of the parks that I work in does that. They want maps that they can write on. And what I've done for them is to take most of the floor detail away and only leave the most recognizable or prominent features so that they can orient themselves to that. That's not exactly answering your question about multi-levels, but I think what you really have to do is get rid of most of the floor details. And I think what you'd have to do if someone is going to write, they're actually going to use paper and write within a cave, they'd have to have multi pages for the multi levels. And in some caves, you can take a tablet in, for example, and on the ROPL map, you can turn on and off the various levels, and you can turn on and off the floor details, for example, and the ceiling details, and annotate a map that way. The problem with a lot of those caves is that it's really miserable conditions for any electronic equipment. It's going to get trashed.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that on your other view, I think in ROPL, you have the survey stations there. Do you have a layer here also with survey stations?
I do not. And in the ROPL one, which is way at the end here, I only list some stations, and I do not have the survey line. That, for example, on the right-hand side, it's book 123, station DL21. And the only reason is if you're somewhere in that passage and you don't know exactly where you are, that one clue might help you. But if you're taking in an electronic copy, you can turn on the survey line, and then you'd see all the survey stations, which would be a mess. Again, that looks like this.
Right.
Do you feel like the ups and downs is sort of the culmination of all your trials?
No, it's just one way to do it in a specific situation. It really depends on the cave. And the way I did post office cave with the multiple plan views stacked side by side, I think is perfect for that one.
Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah, it's helpful.
This one?
Yeah. So is and didn't you have you had a profile view of this one? Was it on the previous slide? There
Yeah.
it is. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty, so this is a lava tube, right?
It is. Well, it's a series of lava flows, one on top of another, where there must have been a cooling period and then another flow fairly close to the first flow, and it would eat a hole in the floor and create a passage between them. There may be layers below this that there's just no way to get down into. But there are multiple flows involved in this instance. And Silver Cave, by the way, was thought to be a separate cave until a connection was made.
Can you go back to the plan?
So I'm looking at this and I'm feeling, just by looking at the map of the profile and the plan view, I'm feeling like by looking at the map, I could navigate in the cave. Is the cave, is that,
I
it more
hope so.
complex?
That's the point.
I mean, yeah, exactly. That is the point. Yeah. And so this is a situation where having the survey stations doesn't necessarily help, because the map gives you all the information that you need.
Well, in this case, the park didn't want permanent stations. In fact, if we put any station in there and had to come back so we can recover it, we had to obliterate the station.
Oh, okay.
Different parks, different rules. That's what they wanted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So over on the left side, so there's the text of outline of all levels of Post Office Cave. You know, you've got sort of a grayed out area underneath it. Is there also multiple levels there, or is that just one level that's out there under that text?
No, that's all the levels combined.
Yeah. Okay, because I mean, what I was first thinking is that, hey, look, if you moved that outline text off a bit to the side, and because I see on the other tunnels, there's a Silver Connection tunnel and the Cocoa pipeline. If you had just put that label also by that, you know, that filled in thing over there, that would help me to understand, like, okay, which level is it that's over there on the side?
Oh,
You're
I got
saying
you.
there's actually multiple over there.
Yeah, I understand. And that's a good point. I think that would make it clearer.
Really interesting, though. I've never seen this before. Very cool.
Thanks.
Can we go to each one? Can we go to the shade one too and look at that? You had several types that you did. It'd be nice to just look at each one and one more time.
Which
The color one, sorry. Color shading. Or either one. Oh yeah, whatever. Because I've seen this done before, and I was never really sure about it.
I'm not either. I didn't know how to do it. I was basically just playing with it, and that's what I came up with.
It's better than what I've done.
Now, there's a textbook answer that says, hey, look, if it's above you, use this type of dashing. If it's below, use this type of dashes. But you
Right.
decided that you thought this was better.
No, actually, I do use that in some cases. I do use dash lines below, and it's a long dash and a short dash for above. I think it really just depends on the cave and what will fit and what makes sense.
Mhm.
And sometimes I found that this shading just seems to make more sense. It doesn't mean it's right. It just means that it made more sense to me at the time that I drew it.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about cartography. You get to do it yourself.
Yeah, right.
As long as you put it in the legend, then you're good to go. And it's just a real challenge for big caves and complex caves to do it effectively. I mean, it's one of the attractions of doing a 3,000 or 4,000 foot long linear cave that's maybe even it's exciting, has a 150-foot drop in it or something, is that you have a really nice profile, really nice plan, really nice cross sections, looks really nice, but the longer the cave, the more levels there are, the more complexity it is. I mean, it's a real challenge, and it's
That's why I love Rock Cave. I mean, I really enjoyed doing that 12 level map. It was just a lot of fun. It was frustrating at times, but it was, in the end, it was a lot of fun. It's much more challenging.
So one of the other reasons for we've talked about a few things, because they're fun. Biology, artifacts, history, um, morphology of the cave is one of them. But finding more cave is a good reason to do good cartography. So when you've done cartography in these different caves, what has been the result as far as finding new opportunities for cave passage?
I tend to be the one who goes back when someone else has surveyed it, and I pick up all the little leads that everyone has left because they didn't look interesting. But in order to finish any map, you really have to look at the whole thing, and you don't just look at a plan view, maybe of someone else's, and see where there might be leads. If you're the cartographer, you really have to just go back and do every single lead that there is. And one of the things that I have picked up, and I think it was Jim Borden who mostly pounded this into me, was to put the leads on the map, and with a layer that you can turn on and off, and a little bit of information about the lead. But I've found that that's pretty successful, because what I'm doing is I'm drafting 2 sections of Fitton Cave in Arkansas, and I haven't been there in years, but the Kayla Sepkoda and others who are doing the surveying for me just take in that paper copy with the survey station shown and what the leads are, and work from there. And having the leads on the map itself really seems to help a lot. And I didn't always do that on historic, in Mammoth, for example. I had the leads in a separate text file, and it would give as much of the description, and sometimes it would use screenshots, but it's really much better if you have it on them. At least for me, it's much better if it's actually on the map. And when they're all gone, then the map is done.
Have you printed out on like Write in the Rain paper or regular paper and laminated it? What do you find is most successful for bringing a printout into the cave?
It depends on the cave. I have no problem bringing just regular paper, normal paper, into Mystery Cave, for example, in Minnesota, because all the areas I'm going to right now are dry. Um, Other times it's on Write in the Rain paper. Just depends on where it is. Yeah.
Yeah, when we've been going into Mystery Cave to work on the leads that Ed gives us, I'm really downloading, everything, all the different survey books, all the cartography I can get from him, and I'm putting it on my active tab 3. And that way I can flip back and forth through, all the years of sketches, all the data, and it's right there. And it's reasonably water resistant. So I've been pretty happy so far.
I just would want to take that into a really wet cave or a wet section of Mystery Cave.
Well, it's the nice thing about those is that when I'm done with the trip, I can just put it in the sink and just put running water on it and wash off all the mud, and it's okay. So I think if you go back, 3-4 years, I'd completely agree with you. But the latest things, they seem to actually be reasonably water resistant.
Good.
And
I'd
then
have to take a look next time I see you up there.
Yeah.
Michael, are you doing digital sketching TopoDroid, or are you doing on paper?
I'm doing both right now. So it sort of it depends. If I'm doing, sketching for somebody else, then lately I'm doing it on paper. I'm still doing it on paper. If I'm doing sketching for myself, I'm doing it electronically. I've tried doing electronic sketching for other people, and it results in hurt feelings and much yelling. And I've gotten yelled at so many times that I'm rethinking about it. But for the stuff that I'm doing, digital TopoDroid is so much faster. Does it look as good as a good hand-drawn sketch? No, of course not. But well, the counter argument is I don't take enough time to make a really beautiful digital sketch. But I personally prefer the digital.
Ed, are you getting sketches on your map sheets or at other caves that are digital?
Almost all of them are at some sort of federal or state cave. They are requiring paper. That's what they want. Mammoth, for example. So you can do something in digital sketching, but I think in the end you have to produce something that's on paper for them to be able to scan and give to the park. And I think for archival purposes too, that's what Karen Wilmus wants, is on paper. And I've seen good digital sketches and I've seen bad digital sketches. It depends on the quality of the sketch, not whether it's digital or on paper.
Yeah, just going off on a quick tangent, I would say that the things that I get yelled at the most for are when there's a small rock that's like a foot by a foot, and I use the TopoDroid symbol for small rock, and I get yelled at by the people who want me to draw the exact details of the 1 foot by 1 foot rock. So.
Yeah, well, I think Mark Jones takes care of that by just saying breakdown throughout. It doesn't have to sketch it. It's not necessarily a good thing, but it's fast.
So I guess going off on another question, I saw a report from someone a couple of weeks ago who was going into a portion of Mammoth, and it was one of the cartographers for the section, and he was bringing in his, the map that he was working on, to proof it. Yes. It was stuff that other people had sketched. He had never actually seen the area, so it was a chance to see, like, hey, does the area look the same as how I drew it? Do you have any thoughts on or interesting stories about having done that?
I do that. And as a matter of fact, I do it in Mystery because anything that I haven't surveyed, I haven't seen. So I take it in and I proof it. The thing that I do is, for Mystery, since it's dry, I bring it in on regular paper, but I make the corrections in red pen so that I can easily see it when on a scanned or a photocopied page. The red really stands out where the changes are made. And, you know, sometimes the sketch doesn't look like the cave, and it's basically so different that I just have to have someone, me or someone else, resurvey it or resketch it. And in fact, if you look at the mystery maps, there's a couple of blank areas where there's a survey line that goes through it, but no sketch, because I can't make sense of the sketch, and you know, the survey line goes through solid walls and that kind of stuff. So proofing a map is a good thing if you can get there and do it. This map that's in front of you now, I've never been in that cave. I think it's in Tennessee, so I can't prove it. What I do in this case, by the way, is send it back to the surveyors and have them make corrections on it, because they've seen the cave.
Ed, these symbols we're seeing on the map right now, are these all hand drawn?
Depends on which one.
So we've got rocks and ceiling height changes and flowstone.
I think everything, the stalactites are a symbol that I have a symbol table, and I just drag it over and change the size. I think everything else is hand drawn. Maybe the columns sort of in the bottom with a squiggly line around it with a solid dot in the middle. I think that's a symbol that I use. And to make them look a little different, I'll drag it in and rotate it a little bit and make it bigger or smaller. And sometimes I would draw another level of squiggles around it if it's a big column. But I mean, symbols really help, but you can't use symbols for everything.
What do you think about putting people into the cave maps?
I like it.
Oh.
I just can't draw people very well. It's
Oh.
good. I mean, it's a good thing. I think I've seen one where they even used an airplane to show, I think it was in a cave map in Borneo or something like that. And I think Bob Osborne drew it, and he put a 747 in there for scale.
So there's a couple comments in the chat. Ian says a big issue with digital is consistency with output conventions like the scale. Absolutely, yep. And the symbols, area symbols. And then Dane said that there's an airplane on the Rumbling Falls map there for scale as well. What's your feeling, Ed, on digital sketching and TopoDroid and Therion?
I think when it comes right down to it, if the person who is doing the sketch on an electronic tablet is a good sketcher, they'll do a good job on the electronics. If they're a bad sketcher, the electronics isn't going to help them. It's a good tool. I certainly have nothing against them. And would I use them? I'm not sure if I would, almost because a lot of the caves that I go into are kind of wet. Can I get rid of this screen? And
do others have questions? Anyone want to go to a different slide and talk about what Ed presented there? Okay, yeah, can you go back to the ROPL?
which one? That's where
the one with the.
No, that one scares me.
There's a lot of cave right there.
That raises the question though, because I mean, you said, "Oh, hey, I was told there were 7 levels, and I found 12." And how have you gone about deciding, how many levels there are and what's on what level?
Well, I started with the levels that were pretty obvious. The lowest level is the river. The highest level is a dome, the top of some of the domes that have a little bit of passage up there. And some suggestions were made for like Eudora or Petrified Wood Passage as being a major traveled passage. And then what I would do from there is if there was something above it, but not a major passage, then I'd have to create another level up for that one. That's how I came to 12. There's nothing, it was just by trial and error that I got to 12. And some of the levels don't have very much on it. It's just that it's below another level, but there's enough passage there that it has to be shown. Let's see. These are the levels.
And when you're deciding that, oh, hey, this level is above, I mean, this tunnel is above this other tunnel, is it because are you looking at the lines in a 3D viewer, or you somehow, let's say they were sketched on different trips?
Oh, I was looking at walls and the elevation in walls.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
everything comes from walls in this case.
Okay. All right, so it's got a nifty tool for like shading the lines and giving you hints about that.
Well, no, actually what I do is I look at the line plot, and then if you right click when you're looking at a line plot, like here, instead of showing you the prefixed stations, like, I don't know, near the top is C1290117, if you right click on that screen, it'll show you the elevation of that station rather than the name of the survey station. That's very handy in walls.
Mm-hmm.
Other page, right? That's what we want to see.
Which one?
The one with the yeah.
So with this map and thinking about the people who would go and explore this part of the cave system, is it possible that someone could get there who didn't have experience with the route already?
I hope so. I mean, that's ultimately the goal of, it seems to me, any map is so someone who's not familiar with it can get there using that map. And I hope so. Of course, it depends on how good the original sketches were.
Yeah.
I think looking at this area, I don't think I have been here. I don't think any of these sketches are mine. So I'm relying on previous surveyors. I think you can see, like on the right-hand side, there's a 6x3. Every once in a while, there's a dig or a 2x2 in the floor. Those are all the leads. And again, when all the leads are taken care of, then the map is done.
I like the height on the cross section's an interesting thing. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, that's the elevation above sea level.
Okay.
And that's where the survey station is in the cross section.
Yes. And if I have multiple If there are a cross section with multiple passages in it, then I have the elevation of each one of the passages. Not always, but if I can fit it in, I will.
Oh, so when you do the cross section, there's the one map where you show, there's the one slide where you show multiple cross section or multiple cross, one slice with all the different levels in a cross section.
Right.
And did you run into a problem where you had to actually send somebody back to get, a sketch of that exact spot above or below, or did you just kind of use the LRUDs?
It just depends. In that case, well, I don't remember. Let me look at it. In this case, I only had one elevation. Other maps that I've done since then, I put the elevation at each one of those. But if something like the sketch of the upper level of Mayfield Avenue, it's a fairly consistent passage.
Right.
So if it's not exactly in the same spot, it's going to be about the same anyway.
Right.
If I do, sometimes you just have to go back, or oftentimes what I do is on a lead list is I'll put a solid line through something and say, do a cross section here through the multiple levels.
Oh,
or
nice.
Just, excuse me, I didn't hear you.
No, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Ed, there's a question from Eric. For carbonate caves in the passage cross sections, do you always use the limestone symbol or illustrate other types like shale or dolomite?
Yes, all the Iowa maps that I do are dolomite. Well, most of them, I'm sorry, most of them are dolomite, so that the vertical lines where you show limestone are not vertical, they're slanted. In lava tubes, I sometimes use the USGS symbol for lava. Most of the time I don't. I just show the outline of the cave. And if there's a layer of sandstone, for example, yeah, I use the stratigraphy for sandstone or chert.
Okay, more questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, Ed, thanks so much for sharing. Really, really appreciate you explaining about these layers and different ways to present them.
You're welcome. Thank you for some suggestions.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's transition to discussion about how to teach folks how to do cave survey. And this can be an open discussion. I'm just going to put up a picture of a cave passage as a prop that'll get us kind of thinking toward that direction. So let's see. Maybe not a great picture, but not nothing. So we can use this. kind of the first one that I grabbed here. Okay, so yeah, not a great picture, but something I took with my phone that I just threw up there, but allows us to think about teaching other people. With the cave mapping program that we're going to do for Greater Cincinnati Grotto, we're calling it cave mapping specifically. You know, we use terms like cave survey and cave cartography. And the reason why we're doing cave mapping is because, you know, cave is a ubiquitous word, map is a ubiquitous word. And we want to make this accessible to everyone. And that's also part of why we want to run this program out of Great Saltpeter. If you look on the walls of this cave, you can see some words. There's graffiti here, and the reason is because this is a heavily traveled cave by many people, and some people don't know to not do that. You know, to not respect the cave. There's some rather lewd graffiti in this cave it's pretty funny. But you know, what we're thinking is basics, basic cavers, you know, and so everybody has used a map, or almost everybody. And we've got them on our phones. We use them to, you know, to get places. And so if we combine cave in a very accessible cave like this one, this is Sinks of the Roundstone, I think. And, you know, common words, we're hoping to get lots and lots of people to, you know, get curious about that. So one of the things that we've done at Mammoth Cave for some of the younger cavers there is to use a stencil for sketching symbols. And we picked the top 6 or 7 symbols that are used in a cave map. So like a ceiling height change and a floor ledge, rock or boulder breakdown, formations, of course the walls, sand or mud, and there might be a couple more, but those are most of them. And in Crystal Cave, we had them practice using those symbols to describe the cave. We gave them a map with walls already on it, showed them how to use the symbols, showed them what they meant, and then just let them walk through the cave and stencil the symbols onto it. You know, and so that's one small part of cave mapping. But for kids anyway, you know, younger people, it worked pretty well. Does anyone have any suggestions for other ways of teaching about cave symbols?
Aaron, I have an observation.
Yeah.
So obviously I cave a lot in tag, and I'm always astounded by the number of cavers I come across, like experienced cavers, people who've been caving for a while, who don't understand how to read a map, don't understand some of the basic parts of it or how to navigate using it. So I don't know what this has to do with teaching people how to survey, but I think, I don't know, I guess we should not assume that, like, you know, good cavers actually know how to use the map or even read it. I don't know if anyone else encounters that, but I've just encountered that a lot here in tag. It's just
I've encountered it also, and it's surprising.
Okay.
I had like a question on there. I was like, should you teach spelunkers how to survey? But you know, that you kind of reminded me of that question, because even if they're just going to come out of it knowing how to read a map with navigation, and they can do it even better, you know, that was a catalyst to them getting to that point.
So maybe that's the starting point, you know, like you know, the kids really like the stencils because, you know, they got to go in the cave and draw pictures and and have a lot of fun and things, but it might have been more fun for them to take the map and try, to basically turn them loose in a part of the cave where they're going to be okay, make them navigate through it using the map. And in that way, they start to discover what those symbols mean. We can give them some instruction, but discovery is a great way to learn. So yeah, that's a really great point, Dane. In fact, I was thinking about that when you were presenting, Ed, about
Check the mailbox. When did you?
what was that? And and about like how useful the map is for navigation, but people have to know what they're looking at to begin with. That's a really great point. Dane, do you think that has created problems for people in navigating?
Well, a lot of tag caves are simplistic. It's either a wet multi-drop where you're just following the water down the drops, or you do have your sort of classic horizontal caves, but I mean, there aren't too many caves here where there are 7 or 12 levels, save like, Fern Cave, some of Petty John's. So I think you can kind of get by with it here a little easier than you could somewhere where the caves are a little more layered.
So maybe walls and locations of drops are adequate for navigating a cave in tag?
For tag purposes, I would say yes. And Ian, you should chime in because you've done a lot of caving in tag. But yeah, I think
a profile without detail is sufficient for navigating most caves that people do in tag.
And so Ray or Zach has a hand up.
No, that's me. Yeah. So I had an idea related to this intersection of navigation and teaching, and something that people might be, I don't know, surprised or not surprised by, that in my my brief stint of university teaching, I encountered a number of people who didn't know how to navigate using like a surface map, like a topographic map. So that's definitely a skill set that needs to be nurtured across the board for people. But my idea for caves is you could almost gamify a map reading exercise. So bringing a set of new cavers. This could be aimed at kids, but anyone might like it. Into the cave, and then kind of build a scavenger hunt sort of model with objectives for them to navigate to within the cave.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, gamifying it sounds great, and you could even go a step further and like leave them with no water, and like hide all the water in specific spots.
Oh, and put the symbol on the map
now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Michael, you got your hand up?
Yep. So you're talking about, hey, how do we teach, beginning sketchers? And, when I was a beginning sketcher, one of the problems I had was that there's so many different things you can draw. There's so many different rocks. There's so many details, passages coming and going. Like, what do you do first? I was just overloaded with options. And so one of the things I appreciated was that, a couple of years ago in Derek's video about sketching, he had a sort of order of precedence on, walls, pillars, ledges, water, rocks, speleothems, slopes, and some other things. And, I made a personal mnemonic for myself so I could remember that. And that helped to give me some structure on, oh, hey, first I should draw the walls, and then next I draw this. And so I wasn't going, quite as crazy. And so that definitely helped me out.
I think the best thing we can all do right now is reflect on how we learned and what worked the most.
Aaron, something I recently helped 2 people who had just taken PK's class, and we went and surveyed some small little nerd holes in tag. And I was kind of telling them, okay, start with the most important thing first. What's the most important detail of this shot? You know, of this 20 feet of passage, what's the most important thing? You know, if there's a 50-foot pit there, that's probably it. If there's a waterfall coming out of the ceiling, that might be it, you know. And then so go from the most important thing, and then so you've got that down, and then maybe get one more thing. And at that point, you've probably gotten a decent little sketch for that shot.
Yeah, I agree. You know, once you've done your first cartography, you know, you find out, look, there's only so much detail you can put in any amount of space. And so, yeah, if you just emphasize that 1 or 2 things that actually matter, you know, that takes a lot of pressure off the sketchers. That definitely helps out.
I would say I feel that having greater detail in sketches is sort of a contextual thing, and that it may matter more in large systems that become generational projects where there are a lot of people going back and either doing resurvey or pushing leads where they're looking for tie-in stations. And that's something you encounter a lot in Mammoth, is that a lot of the sketches that you get are a much higher level of detail than are going to be present on the finished map, because you're at a way smaller scale on the finished map. But it's still valuable to have a very detailed sketch with tons of cross sections, because when you're trying to recover a station from 40 years ago, that's going to be a lot easier when you can pick out a specific rock on the side of the passage and get your bearings based on that.
How long does it take to learn survey?
That's an interesting question. Wow.
A lifetime.
Like, yeah, I would say so. But I mean, like, to get to a place where you can draw a minimal map, like, could you take someone out for a couple weekends? I would say so. I don't know if that's anybody's experience here. For me, it was years before I was drawing any maps myself, just because I wanted to explore caves, and one of the skill sets they needed was people who could push caves and sketch them, you know, and then turn in those notes. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, what's the shortest amount of time that someone could learn how to survey, learn how to reduce data, learn how to draw the fundamental symbols for, say, a 1,000-foot long cave?
Or are you talking doing the sketching, or are you talking doing the cartography?
The whole thing, start to finish.
I mean, Dane just had some experience with some people who took a week-long course on cave mapping with no prior experience in it.
Yeah, and I'll say those people were highly motivated cavers who I have known, and they took that class, and they had a pretty good idea, a pretty decent idea of what to do, but definitely, like, wouldn't say had the same, you know, expertise as someone who's been doing it for a while. So, and thinking about my own experience, it took a long time.
I took that class in 2013, and I think Howard was on here earlier, but he was helping with it, and I did. It was a week, and I studied hard during it. You know, I took it really seriously. I was just getting into caving, but after that week, I was ready to go try my own projects, and I had my fair share of like survey blunders and issues and all that. But I after an intensive course, I was personally ready to go and make my own mistakes and learn from them. But it took at least a year after that to really hone everything down.
I think it does take quite a while. And one thing that I've heard, and I think it's almost always true, not necessarily always, but that's in order to be a good sketcher, you have to be a good cartographer, because then as a cartographer, you know what to look for in sketching as far as, mistakes. For example, a common mistake on new sketchers is to draw the cross section at a much wider dimension than the plan view would show, or the height of the cross section would not equal the profile view. And if you're a cartographer and being critiqued by other cartographers, they would point out to you that the cross sections make no sense, or the profile makes no sense, or so I have seen a few good sketchers that are not cartographers, but I think the reason is because they get a lot of feedback from the cartographer.
Ed, that's a really good point, because when I really started getting even profiles on cartography can be really weird unless you're doing an extended one. You start to understand what those important things that you are needing to sketch first are when you understand what that cartographer is going to be doing in a chair for hours.
Yeah.
So in the teaching and learning, practicing, how important is it for someone to very early on in their learning present some kind of a map?
In the class, in the PAT class, it was that the end of the week you produced what you practiced on almost. But they had us sketch it on Mylar back then too, before we did it on the computer.
Yeah, it's not always easy to have a class where you have a week to teach someone. I mean,
right, it's not practical at all.
It isn't. And just last weekend, we were up at Mystery Cave teaching 5 new people how to survey and how to sketch. And I may not see those people again. So there's no carry through or follow through.
Speaking as a really new person to sketching, the thing that's helped me a lot has been the feedback that Ed gives on the mystery sketches.
Your last sketch was good.
Thanks. It helped that it was a relatively simple area, so I didn't get overwhelmed like I would in a larger room. And I think that building up in levels, so starting with these skinny canyon passages that don't have much going on and are relatively easy to sketch, helps build the fundamental skills.
It does, and it teaches you how to sketch to scale, and it's satisfying that you can actually complete something that looks like the cave without being overwhelmed by a big passage that has a lot going on.
Ed, you mentioned that you brought up a good point about the follow through thing, because you're right, it's not practical to do it week long. So how do you if people actually want to do it, how do you motivate them, or how do you help motivate them a little bit with some follow through? Is there any, not not asking you in particular, but in general, how would somebody go about doing that?
At least from what I've done with some of the Iowa Grotto people in Mystery Cave or in other caves in Iowa, they've expressed the interest, and then I make sure that I'm able to get out with them multiple times so that they have the experience. It's not just a one-shot deal, that they can come back a week later, 2 weeks later, and continue. The people that I was with last weekend, Minnesota cavers, I am not sure. I'm not sure how they're going to keep up their experience. they'd have to probably on their own talk to Michael or someone else who is surveying in mystery to see if they can join that trip and sketch or just help out with the survey.
Should everybody know how to sketch?
No, well, they might want to try it, but I don't think sketching is for everyone. And some people just simply do not like it.
And if they don't, there's plenty of other things to focus on. So maybe even asking people what they actually are passionate about in the survey roles is a good move, and then just doubling down on what they actually want to do.
I agree. And some people really like to do inventory, which is one of the things that's done a few places, Carlsbad Caverns and Mystery Cave, where they really want a detailed inventory of both any biology, human activity, geological layers, any kind of speleothems, that sort of thing, minerals. So they enter it into a GIS system or some other kind of database. And some people really like to do that. And that's terrific.
So going back to the thing about the map, earlier this year, Ray and I went to a small cave in Wayne County, Kentucky, that had been surveyed previously. It blows a gale of air. I mean, oh my gosh, there's a massive cave not very far from there, probably on the other side of a breakdown pile. But can't believe I'm not there every weekend, to be honest. But even though it had been surveyed, the landowners never had a map of it. And so what I was thinking was, what's the fastest way to get them a map, right? And so I had this kind of crazy concocted plan where I would take a generator and fire it up after we came out of the cave after surveying it, and plug in my laptop and do up the map and print it out, right? Generator there, so I'd be able to print out the, you know, the paper copy and hand it over to them. And after I started looking at the gear I would need to do this, you know, printer and, you know, the generator, and I was like, there's got to be an easier way. So what I did instead is I pre-printed a 8.5 by 11 um, um, Right in the Rain page that had the name of the cave on it, had the landowners' names, the county, the location, the scale bar, and everything else. And the only thing that I did, and this is not it, but this is 8.5 by 11. The only thing that I did was I just drew in the cave from my notes and handed them a map. And turns out that was a really good thing because they kind of like they were doing backflips. They finally had a map of their cave, even though it was, you know, relatively simplistic. So that has me thinking about the sketchers who are, you know, contributing. You know, once they get into a project, they really understand what, you know, what they're doing, and they know, you know, how to fill out the you know, the pages and things like this. But for newer folks, if we give them a templatized sheet to work from, and they're able to walk away with a map of some kind, you know, maybe that, you know, maybe that keeps their interest a little bit more. Kind of in the same way that those landowners were, you know, happy to get a map of their cave. It's just an idea, but
It's a good idea to get a landowner something quickly. It's also a good idea to get the for the cartographer to get that section of the map drafted quickly and sent back to the survey team.
Yeah.
It has two advantages. One is that they can make corrections. If they didn't mean something, they'll fix it. And I've had that happen a lot. And the other thing is, it makes them much more likely to want to go to leads that you have if they know they're getting feedback from it, or they see that the map is actually being produced. A lot of times cartographers, I think, are kind of arrogant in the sense that they either don't share the map at all with the people who surveyed, or they're really very, very slow, like years and years before they actually draft it and send it back to the surveyors.
I think that's a great comment, Ed. And that's what I've really liked about when I've worked on your map sheets, is you've turned around the product of those survey teams very quickly, and that does keep people engaged. I think that's probably maybe one of the single most important pieces there, is that people get to see the results of their efforts.
Yeah, and they're volunteers; they deserve to.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point right there. Yeah. Well, this has really been interesting. I mean, the whole thing. Does anyone have any additional questions or comments, suggestions? I think we're all here because we like caves, cave mapping, cave cartography. Yeah, so I find it exciting and fun.
Where were you going to put the recording of this?
So we have in the process of finally a YouTube page, and we're using Teams right now. And so ideally this recording will be very simple. And so it would be on the GCG YouTube page, which I am told will be ready Friday. And we do have other videos from previous calls that would be ready to put there as well. So that's what our intention is, since we struggled through several months of not having a way of recording and then not having a way of posting them, and hopefully we have that solved now. So fingers crossed.
Thanks.
But yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and please come back next month, and we'll continue these conversations on cave survey and cartography. And Ed, thanks again so much for presenting tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, and for doing this.
Welcome. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks.
Thanks.